understanding your role as a podcast manager. This is a jam-packed episode. Lots of information, lots of lists, lots of things to keep in mind because there are so many variations as to what a manager or a producer does. Clients are different, shows are different, shows change and evolve. Some may start out as audio, turn into video. Maybe the show joins a network. Maybe the host changes midway through, etc., etc., etc. There is no such thing as one size fits all when it comes to podcasts. Every show is different, every client relationship is different, and at the end of this video, you should have a better idea of what managing entails and what you may or may not want to do. First up, project management. There's a few things that entails. One is time management. You need to be able to handle multiple episodes, multiple deadlines, post-production schedules, etc. Organization. You need to be able to efficiently manage files, show notes, and assets, and sometimes people. Task prioritization, knowing how to prioritize tasks across production, promotion, and release. You need to figure out what things need to be done, in what order, and by whom. There are certain people who can only do certain things. Prioritization is huge, and that's all on you. Audio and video production skills. Editing. You need to understand audio editing software. Audacity, Audition, GarageBand, there's quite a few of them. And you need to be at least a little bit familiar with video editing, especially if you have a video podcast. Doesn't necessarily mean you have to be the one who's doing it. If you don't want to do it, just make sure you get a freelancer. But you need to understand enough of what they're doing so that you can have a conversation with them. As a longtime audio and video editor, it's really frustrating when I'm having a conversation with someone who doesn't understand anything of what I'm doing. So make sure you have at least a basic understanding of the actual process, how they ingest files, what they're doing with the files, how they're adding intros, outros. Do you want every single removed, or do you only want some of them removed? Like, there's a lot of information that they need to know, and you need to be able to answer their questions. And that's because you need to be able to be the troubleshooter. If there's any problems anywhere along the entire pipeline, that's on you to figure it out. Sometimes that's fun, often it's not. Content strategy and audience engagement. You need to have a very basic knowledge of SEO so that you can craft episode titles, descriptions, show notes that will attract listeners. Social media management. Engage and grow audiences through social media posts, stories, reels, announcements. And just like with the editing, that does not mean that you have to be the one who's doing all the social media. That is something that you can hand off to a freelancer, but you need to know what they're doing, and you need to be able to organize all of that content that's going out. What kind of social media content do you want put together? What is the schedule? What is the tone of voice? How do you want all of that to happen? That's all on you. And another thing that's a bit of a mix between you and your client is the audience research. Understanding the target audience. What are their interests? What is the platforms they prefer to listen to? And what is the content that best aligns with what they want to hear? Here's a great one, interpersonal communication skills. Collaboration. You have to be able to work well with hosts, guests, possibly your production team. Client management. You need to be responsive to your client's needs. Whatever their feedback is, whatever their expectations are, you need to have open communication. Networking. You need to be able to build industry connections and foster partnerships with other podcasters, with guests, with hosts, with sponsors. You need to be able to connect your show, whether it's your personal show or a client's show, you need to be able to connect it with other people. Branding and design awareness. Graphic design basics. You need to have at least a familiarity with what the tools look like. Let's say Canva, Photoshop, anything of that sort. Brand consistency. You need to be able to maintain a cohesive brand voice across platforms and episodes. And that's the show itself and the show notes and the social media content. Aesthetic sense. You need to understand what the visual style that will appeal to your particular audience is. Analytical skills, not my forte. So you need to be able to analyze different platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, social media platforms, etc., because you need to be able to improve content and you need to be able to verify if your growth strategy is working. So you need to be able to read the numbers, where your audience is as far as the podcast goes, what countries they're from, what the different demographics are, and then you also need to understand which social media platform they like. If your audience loves Instagram, do everything on Instagram. If your audience loves TikTok, make sure most of your social media is going onto TikTok. Another aspect of analytics is A/B testing. You want to be able to experiment with episode titles, with thumbnails, with different formats to see what resonates best with your audience. And if you don't know what A/B testing is, what that means is that you put out some kind of content with two different options. Let's say you make a social media post and you have the exact same written content, but you choose one image for the post, and then you either choose a different platform or you choose a different time of day, and you just switch out the image, but you keep all of the rest of the content the same, and then you literally just sit back and see which of the two the audience responds to. Same thing you can do with titles. You can title something one way. Maybe you do a short video snippet from your episode. You title it one way, release another little video snippet, maybe the other half of that same conversation, put a different title on it, see if the two titles respond differently with your audience. So being able to read the numbers of what your audience is responding to is going to help you immensely. One of my favorites, flexibility and problem solving. You need to be adaptable, navigate changes in production, guest schedules, or platform algorithms. You always need to be learning new things, stay ahead of industry trends. Quick decision making. You need to address last-minute challenges or unexpected issues efficiently. Making poor choices is better than making no choice. Make a decision, and if you realize you made a bad decision, fix the decision and keep going. But don't make no decision at all, because the whole thing is going to fall apart that way. Professionalism and workflows. Be receptive to constructive criticism and feedback from clients or listeners. You cannot get instantly frustrated anytime someone gives you any kind of constructive feedback, especially if it's a client that you're working for. Make sure you're keeping that relationship as positive as you can, and if you don't understand the feedback they're giving to you, continue to follow up until you get the answers that you need. Keep everything positive, keep everybody happy, and keep the show moving forward. Which leads directly into stress management. You have to be able to maintain composure under tight deadlines and manage the stress that comes with a high-paced production environment, especially if you have a lot of freelancers that you're dealing with. Follow a structured workflow. This allows you to ensure high-quality, consistent, and timely episodes. This is something we're going to go into a lot in future episodes, and a lot of that is going to consist of different programs you can use, different checklists you can use, different workflows you can follow to keep everything organized. You are going to have dozens, hundreds, possibly thousands of assets that you have to continually keep organized, keep on schedule, and keep everything moving forward. You cannot wing it. You absolutely cannot wing it. You have to have some kind of a structure, some kind of a workflow, and you need to keep everybody on the same page at all times. I think that's fun, but I'm probably just weird. I am just weird. But don't quote me on that. Actually, you can quote me on that. In summary, a few actionable tips you can do. Create a checklist of all podcast management tasks. Familiarize yourself with podcasting software. Descript and CastMagic are two that I've used a lot. Set weekly meetings with clients to review progress and gather feedback. If the show's been going for a while, you can probably move that to monthly. Research industry trends to keep clients informed about new tools and strategies. This is something that you need to do continually. This is not just a few times a year sort of thing. Learn basic audio editing skills with software like Audacity, GarageBand, Audition, whatever. The program doesn't matter. Just make sure you have at least a basic understanding, even if you're sending it off to somebody else. Experiment with different microphones and settings to find optimal sound quality. Incorporate intros and outros for consistent branding. Intros and outros need to follow exactly the voice of the show. Master the organization and scheduling aspect. It's key for balancing multiple clients. Develop effective communication strategies to clearly convey plans, updates, and insights. A lot of that will be done in the meetings that you have with your clients. A couple of terms that you definitely need to know. This list would be massive. I'm just going to give you two. The first is RSS feed. And no joke, RSS means really simple syndication. That's literally what that means. It's the web feed that allows podcast episodes to be distributed to listeners automatically. When you set up a podcast, what you're doing is you're setting up an RSS feed, and then you put that RSS feed. Most people put that RSS feed inside Apple Podcasts, and then they use Apple Podcasts, which takes your RSS feed, and that is what distributes your show everywhere, to all podcast players, to everywhere that can play podcasts. All of those players are using your RSS feed. Think of it as like the address for where your show is, and your show gets dispersed from there. But that's where the show actually lives, is inside the RSS feed. It's what podcast players and apps use to update episodes. Next is going to be the podcast hosting platform, and that's where your audio files actually are stored. Like, that's where they live online. A few of those would be Acast, Podbean, Buzzsprout, Libsyn, Anchor. That list goes on and on and on. I've used all the ones that I've just mentioned, and all of them are good. Doesn't really matter which one you use, but you need to have a place where you actually upload the MP3 file, the actual audio file, where you put all that information in. So you upload that information into the host, and then the host updates your RSS feed. In summary, a couple of key takeaways. Podcast managers oversee all aspects of a podcast: planning, editing, and distribution. The role requires technical knowledge, organizational, and people skills. Managers must balance creativity with logical planning. And as I mentioned earlier, there is no such thing as one size fits all. If you don't want to be the person to find and book guests, make sure you get a booker. If you don't want to be the person who's editing the show, make sure you bring in an editor. If you only want to work virtually and you don't want to do anything in person, just make that clear to whoever you're working with. Make sure the process works for you. Thanks for watching. Subscribe down below for more insights on building a value-driven podcast.